We are now about 2 months away from the 2024 NHL Draft. The NHL Draft is where we see a lot of trade activity. Today we're going to take a look at the latest rumors regarding what we could see at the draft. We're going to take a look at which teams have the most draft capital, which teams have the least, which are some of the big names we should be watching out for potential trades at this event. We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today I want to look ahead here to the 2024 NHL Draft and take a look at some of the speculation and rumblings of what we could see happen at that event. It's a high, likelihood that we're going to see a lot of activity. It's always one of the busiest times of year. Obviously, you have lots of NHL players, getting selected in the draft. It's an exciting time. Teams are picking future leaders on their team, etc. But there's also usually lots of trades, and some of those trades involve just swapping picks or packaging up multiple picks, trying to move up. You see a lot of activity involving current and established star players sometimes. So let's take a look today at which players have some of the most draft capital in the NHL, which teams have the least, and in both of those scenarios, it could drive reasons for trade. If you have some of the most draft capital, like I said, maybe you'll use some of those picks and you'll go after some existing players. You want to bring in some immediate help on your team. You might offer a team, a couple of draft picks or a first rounder or what have you for a trade. Or you may say, I want to get another first round pick, so I'm going to offer this team, 2 second rounders or something like that. Teams with the least amount of picks, well, you might look at their situation and say, well, they could really use, a good prospect in their system here. If there's a player they really like, especially, maybe we see them trade an existing player to one of those teams that have a lot of picks to try to bring in some more draft capital for themselves. Oftentimes those teams with the, low amount of draft capital, usually some of the top teams in the league that's been competing for the Stanley Cup and have made a lot of deadline trades, try to make their team better, to have deep playoff runs. And, well, sometimes it pays off, and obviously a lot of times it doesn't, because there's only ever one Stanley Cup winner each and every year. So, unfortunately, a lot of these teams make moves, and they don't always pay off, but you have to try if you think you have a chance. That's just the way sports work. So let's first take a look at the list of teams that have the most draft capital. Then we'll take a look at the ones that have the least amount, followed by some of the likely scenarios we could see unfold and some of the top names to watch over the next 8 weeks and at the draft that could be moved. So starting with the teams with the most amount of picks is a new team in Utah. We'll refer to them as the Coyotes. I'll use the Coyotes logo for now because we don't know what they're going to be called, and we don't have a new logo just yet. But for right now at this draft, they have 13 selections, which is the absolute most in the NHL. They have 7 picks in the first 3 rounds. This team already has a decent amount of young talent. Obviously, we know the group didn't have an awesome season, but we did see glimpses this year of good progress, and they do have a lot of potential. I think they're still missing a lot of pieces to their puzzle. They work hard, they're well coached, but they still need a lot of help. And I do think with this new ownership and the transition to Utah, we are going to see that owner pump more money into the franchise than the previous owners have in quite some time. So not only do I expect them to be busy at the draft, I expect them to be busy in free agency, which will come shortly after. And I do think that with the base of good young, solid, established young players they have now, with some younger veterans, like a Clayton Keller and like a Nick Schmaltz, like they're veterans already because they get into the league so young. But they're still young players. Like, they're still only in their mid-20s, right? So at the same time, you have them, then you have your Logan Cooley's and your Dylan Gunters and your Michellis and, all those guys to kind of continue building around. So obviously, you add some a veteran or two through free agency. Maybe you trade a couple picks, bring in some help at the draft, and boom, just like that, you might find 2 or 3 more guys that suddenly make this team a lot more competitive. So the Utah-based NHL team, it will be very busy, 13 picks, 7 in the first 3 rounds, and there's no way they're going to use all those picks. So expect them to be very busy, one of the headliners here at this event. Montreal continues to be at the top of this list. They've been there since the last couple of years with Ken Hughes at the helm. They have 12 picks this year, including 2 first-rounders. Montreal has kind of gained a reputation for themselves the last couple of drafts of going after top young players that need a fresh start, new home, what have you. Not like you're buying damaged goods at a discount, so to speak, but sometimes players don't always work out, or they just don't find the right role with their existing team, like we saw with Kirby Dach and Alex Newhook. It's widely expected with the amount of picks they have, they will attempt to do that kind of deal again, and they will find that player. Who that is this year, hard to say. There's lots of young players around the league that you kind of wonder if they could benefit from a fresh start. There's a number that come to mind. I know Kent Johnson in Columbus comes to mind. Trevor Zegras in Anaheim comes to mind. So we'll see what Ken Hughes and Jeff Gorton decide to do. But Montreal, again, will be busy. I do expect them to make a splash. And, wouldn't surprise me to see them at least make one significant deal. At draft time, the Flyers are right up there as well with 10 picks. They have 4 picks in the first 2 rounds, multiple in each of the first 2. So Philly, again, they had, I don't know what you want to call this year. It's almost like, we thought they were going to be a playoff team for a long time, and then they bottomed right out at the end of it. And I know from a fan base perspective, I've heard a lot of fans say, well, I wish they just would have bottomed out earlier because they could have got a way better draft pick. And that's true. At the same time, it's tough to tell competitive athletes and a very competitive coach in John Tortorella that losing is better. It's not the way they're wired. So they're not going to go out there and try to lose, which is, I know you can make an argument what's better long-term for the franchise, but like I said, you got to compete each and every night. Either way, they're a team that's going through significant change over the past couple seasons. That's going to continue with 10 picks and 4 early in the 2 early rounds. I definitely feel like the Flyers are going to be a team to watch. I expect them to draft in the first round for sure. But you never know. Maybe after their first round pick, which will be their own and highest pick, maybe at that point, some of the next 2 or 3 picks wouldn't be shocking if they went after an existing player. But then again, the draft capital, like the prospect pool, is not the deepest just yet. It's getting there after what they added last year, but we'll see. Either way, they're going to be a busy team. They may pick more than like Montreal or the Utah franchise, given where things are at in a rebuild. We have a bunch of teams with 9 picks. We have the Calgary Flames, which include 2 first-rounders. The Kraken, the Blues, both have 9, but they only have 1 in the first round. They've been able to add other mid to late round picks. The Ducks and the Hawks both have 9, which include both of them having 2 first-rounders as well. The Ducks also have 2 seconds, while Chicago has 3 seconds. So Chicago is going to be busy. We know that both teams have expressed desire to get better and more competitive next year, so I fully suspect we're going to see, some draft capital being traded for existing help that can come in and help that team be better right away. Neither one of them will move their first round pick. I wouldn't think we're going to see any activity in the top 5-6 picks. There's a lot of great players there available. Could we see a top 10 pick moved? Maybe, but if we did, I would think it'd be more likely to be like that 7 to 10 range. Sometimes you see a team might be like, well, the guy we really wanted is gone. We're not really in love with any of these guys. We're willing to move back a little bit if we can get an extra asset or something. You could see deals like that involve some of these teams too. But Anaheim, Chicago will definitely be picking high and will use their first rounders. But what they do with the additional draft capital after that is debatable. Like with Anaheim having picked high now, in a few drafts in a row. I mean, obviously, look, the last few years they've picked up Leo Carlson and Mason McTavish, and they got some good young blue liners with Zellweger and Mitnikov and others back there. Like, they've got a pretty good core group of young players that will be with that team for a long time. So, at the end of the day here, it wouldn't be shocking if Anaheim try to bring in some more veteran help to move the team forward. Besides Anaheim, Chicago, San Jose, and Nashville also both have 9 picks. San Jose has 2 first-rounders as well. Obviously, with San Jose having the Carlson trade for the Pittsburgh pick, but of course that Pittsburgh pick was top 10 protected. Unless they win the lottery, they won't be that high. So at the end of the day here, they should have the 2 first rounders. So again, San Jose is going to be an interesting team. They just fired their coach. They are a team that's going through more change, and they fully bottomed out yet, which is surprising to say, considering how bad they were this year. But like I said, they must have been really unimpressed with David Quinn. because they were expected to be bad, and then they made themselves even worse by the trades they made. I mean, they traded Carlson before the season started, then they moved out Hurdle and others, so like they moved out Declare. Like, what were you expecting? I don't know if this was more of a result base, but it's kind of odd that David Quinn's most success, or he was most known for, was at Boston University, where he was an assistant coach for, I think, 4 or 5 years, and then he was a head coach. Later on, he left and then came back as head coach for another run for 4 or 5 years there, and that's where he's definitely had his most success, where he gained his most notoriety to become an NHL coach, but yet all of his pro opportunities have not really lasted long and have kind of blown up to be fired quickly. Like, he lasted with the Rangers 3 years and 2 years in San Jose, and both those GMs have ties to BU, where he came from. So there's definitely a lot of, it's not that they didn't play for him there, but at the same time, like, they were, obviously well connected with a lot of the, same people that they would know and, be connected to. So it's not like he came without some pretty strong references from people they trust. So obviously they both changed their mind early on in that process. So that's interesting. So we'll see what the Sharks do. I'm not sure if how much bad, like, can they be worse? Or if they're going to try to bring in veterans to get better? That's a tough sell, though, and they had it that bad of a season. So I'm not sure how easily they can get better. Other teams on this list of most picks include Washington, Ottawa, and Detroit, all with 8. The only one of the bunch that have multiple first-rounders is the Sens. They have the first-rounder that originally belonged to the Bruins, which came via Detroit in the DeBrincat deal. So they have 2 first-rounders as well. With where things are at with the Senators, they're going to be bringing in a new head coach. We know that they have a lot of good young players now, but the prospect pool is getting a little thin because a lot of their top young players have graduated to the NHL. They still have a couple of interesting players, but they don't. They're kind of missing that high impact player, if you will, in the prospect pool. All those players that had that kind of tag to them are in the NHL. You got your Brady Kachucks, your Tim Stützles, your Josh Norris. Well, actually, they traded for Norris. He came in the Carlson deal. And then, Batherson and Sanderson and all those guys. Like, they all drafted with high-end potential, but they're there now. And, like, you're looking at the prospect pool, there's not a lot there that's to really get excited about. The most recent first rounder, Tyler Boucher, is looking like a bust. I hate to put that name on anybody, but he barely played since he's been drafted. He's always hurt, hasn't really developed. He went from college to the OHL to play for the 67s, which should have been great for him. It was in a sense, but then he got hurt again. And then this year he was pro, but barely played. Like, I don't know what's going on with the kid, but it's not looking good to work out long-term for sure. But we'll see. I mean, if Ottawa wants to use one of those first rounders to bring in another player that can help them get better, because they definitely want to get better and take a big step next year. So if they can do that, that would not surprise me in the least. Now, looking at the teams with the least amount of picks, like I said, these teams could be trying to move players off their roster to bring in first and second round picks if they can, because they have so little draft capital. And Boston and Vancouver and Dallas lead the way with 3. Obviously, the Bruins and Stars and Canucks have made a lot of trades, trying to go for it here, if you will. So Boston doesn't have a very deep prospect pool. Dallas, it still has a few good ones in the hopper there, but a lot of their ones are like, we've seen Wyatt Johnson graduate recently. Maverick Bork's pretty well ready to jump up, and Harley, and after that, but I guess the thing with Dallas too is they've been better than most teams at finding that later pick, whether it be a later first rounder or second rounder, that have worked out nicely for them. So I'm not sure that they do a lot, but right now, as I record this video, they're down in their series in the first round to Vegas after having a phenomenal regular season. You never know. Maybe they do move a player out and try to get another first rounder or something. I don't know. We'll see. But I don't know that Dallas will overreact to that. In Vancouver, they have a couple of picks that are tied to trades right now. So that number of 3 could be as many as 5 if those conditions are not met and they get to keep those picks. They're, I believe, third and fourth rounders. So we'll see. Florida is either going to have 3 or 4 again because they have a pick tied to a trade. So again, the Panthers have been spending draft capital like crazy, and they don't really seem to care because they want to try to win a Stanley Cup. LA, Vegas, and the Rangers all are going to have 4 picks as of right now for this draft as well. And again, I don't know that any of them really really care that much about it. I'm not sure that we're going to see Vegas or the Kings making trades to try to bring in more draft capital. If they're active, then it'll be for other hockey-related trades that are not necessarily tied to draft picks. Rangers, the same would go for them. I mean, at the end of the day, these teams are good. They're playoff teams for a while now, and they're trying to win. So to me, they're not looking for draft picks. So I don't expect them to be busy, but there'll be some of the teams that, if something changes in their approach, they could go down that road. For some of the storylines and headlines that keep watching for, like as I mentioned, Montreal definitely expected to go after a top young player. Who that is this year, I don't know, but they're fully expected to be looking to do that. Look for Chicago to bring in some serious help to work with Connor Bedard via the draft and via trade. The Utah team, Coyotes formerly, are going to be extremely busy with new ownership. That's going to be a huge storyline and probably one of the biggest ones to follow here with 13 picks, an owner with deeper pockets and a strong desire to put a good product on their ice for the first season of their franchise for their new fans. That team is going to be busy, and they might be one of the busiest, if not the busiest in the league. As far as names to watch, I would look out for guys like Jacob Chychrun in Ottawa. We know there's a lot of uncertainty around his future with the Sens. If a deal's going to happen, it makes sense to happen at the draft. They'll likely have contract extension talks. I mean, they can't officially sign anything with them if they're going to keep them until July 1st, but they'll want to know ahead of time what things are looking like, and I would imagine they'll have those negotiations first before they probably make a firm decision. So we'll see if they can get him signed to the right contract. There is a chance he stays, but they can't overpay. They can't have 3 left shot defensemen making $8 million. That's just mathematically not great when their right side's going to end up being weaker, and other areas of the team need some improvement too. Linus Ullmark in Boston will have some say where he goes if he does get moved, but he's a name that's been out there along with some other goalies between Ullmark, UC Saros, Jacob Markstrom. I'd throw Jordan Binnington into that mix as well. I know at one point Elliot Friedman made mention that he wonders if the Blues would move Binnington this summer. He does have some trade protection in his contract too, so he would have a bit of say over where he goes. But obviously the Blues, at the same time, I think they might feel that they're not that far away from getting back to the playoffs, but they also have Joel Holford. Depends on how they feel about him, and is he ready to be the starter? If they can move Binnington, they could save some money in goaltending for a year or two while they're waiting for Holford's next contract, and might be able to help them make other areas of the team better, which could get them back in the playoffs. So they have to analyze everything there, but a bunch of goalies there: Binnington, Markstrom, Ullmark, Saros. I'd keep an eye on all those names. Not a given that they all move, but I would suspect that some of them will, and it'll make things interesting. Like I said, Trevor Zegras is a name to watch. The rumor mill's been rampant with his name. Patrick Laine needing a fresh start. It's been out there a lot. We'll see. That's going to be complicated, though, given when he signed for a contract. Marty Necas in Carolina. It's not that they don't like Necas, but they need new contracts for a few players, including Necas, Jarvis, and a few others as well. And I just don't know that Necas is going to get the priority. I think Jarvis will be signed first. So he's an interesting name out there. Mid-20s, still probably hasn't reached his full potential, but he's a real good player and sometimes inconsistent. But, I wonder in a different system if he would be able to put up better offensive numbers. So we'll see, but he's definitely a name to watch as well. A little bit less likely, but Pierre-Luc Dubois. I know the Kings are not thrilled with how things have worked out, but with that monster contract and the reputation following him around, our team is going to be real anxious to trade for Dubois. I don't know. It's going to be real complicated, but I know his name will be out there, and you might hear a little bit of speculation around him about whether or not a deal gets done. It's a little bit on the lesser likely side, but we'll see. Either way, the 2024 NHL draft is going to feature lots of great players, including Macklin Celebrini. You can go through some of the mock drafts we've done if you haven't already to kind of see where things can go. Obviously, we haven't done a deep dive on the prospects beyond the top 10, 15 picks, but we will do that getting closer to the draft here as well. So certainly let me know your thoughts on what you expect of the draft. Which teams do you hope to see or think will be the most busy, and what kind of deals should we be expecting? I think it's going to be a busy time. It's likely going to be the last draft in the current format held in Vegas at the Sphere. I think teams are going to want to make a big splash, and should be fun. After this, the draft will be formatted completely different, and I don't know if it's going to lose its busyness and stuff. But with GMs not necessarily being in the same building, I wonder if it'll have the same impact for the amount of activity we usually see. So let me know your thoughts on all that and more down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.